with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Coming up, we will have half an hour of business news and analysis. On today's show, China warns that additional EU tariffs on Chinese EVs would harm Europe's own interest. And Apple says ChatGPT will be accessible on its devices later this year. And now let's begin with our top story. China says it's strongly dissatisfied with the European plan to impose provisional duties on imports of Chinese electric vehicles. A spokesperson from the China's Ministry of Commerce says the tariffs are an act of protectionism. He said they will create trade friction and destroy fair competition. The spokesperson said this will harm the rights and interests of China's EV industry, and it will also hurt the supply chain of the global auto industry. The European Commission is threatening up to 38.1% of tariffs for Chinese EVs in July. So for more on this, join us on the line now, Liu Baocheng, professor with the University of International Business and Economics, and also Yan Liang, professor of economics, Willamette University. So I will start with you first. Could you take us through the details of the EU tariffs on Chinese EVs, and what are the political and economic factors behind the EU's decision?
The individual duties the Commission are going to apply depends on the different manufacturers. For example, BYD is going to have an additional 17.4% of tariffs. Geely is going to be 20%, and SAIC is going to be 38.1%. And by the way, all these are additional tariffs on top of the 10% tariff rates that have already been imposed on all Chinese exports of cars into the EU.
So, Baocheng, what do you think about this? China says the tariffs are an act of protectionism. So how do you view EU's investigation?
Well, I would like to remind the listeners that of the long haul with regard to the Chinese role in the area of global trade, because in 2016, as a matter of fact, the world has been talking about whether China shall graduate from the market economy status. And it seems that the market economic status did not really deliver to China within the WTO framework. And actually, ever since, the EU has been preparing all sorts of investigation with regard to Chinese, what is so-called significant distortion of the economy. So actually in 2017, EU already produced a report, and they name it as a trade defense investigation. And actually in April this year, they produced another updates with regard to the significant distortion in the PRC economy. So it directly points to the social and economic and institutional setting of China. So this, the tariff is really a derivative towards what they term as trade defense against China's aggressive exports. So there will be a slew of other measures that yet to come. So now I think China has been also doing a lot of preparation with regard to how China can defend its own position. The Chinese government level, MOFCOM people, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also the Chamber of Commerce. But right now, it is very difficult to change the situation, because conceptually and even ethically, they have decided on the Chinese distortion. But of course, technically, the companies can be more cooperative in order to reduce the level of punishment, like BYD did. And now I think it is still open, because the investigation will continue until November 2nd. So there are still room for further negotiation, and there has also been successful precedents through negotiation, both sides found an amicable solution to such an issue. So right now, it is really a reminder the preparedness of different institutions and particularly companies, chamber of commerce like, whether they are ready to defend their own position with regard to such sort of accusation, I should say.
And yeah, so the EU argues that a flood of cheaper Chinese EVs is entering the European market due to so-called state subsidies. So do you believe this is a fair argument?
I don't think so. I think the evidence suggests the opposite. When we look at the numbers, for example, the China Chamber of Commerce to the EU has indicated that China's exports of the battery electric vehicle, the BEV, accounts for only 5% of EU's BEV total production in 2023. As a matter of fact, if we look at, for example, the 12 months ending by April this year, China exported only about 440,000 BEVs into the European markets, and that accounts for a very small market share, somewhere between 5 to 8%. And so this whole idea of that Chinese cars are flooding the European market is simply not true. And not to mention, I think a lot of the cars that China now exporting to the EU actually are the higher range price cars. They're not including, the very competitive cars, for example, the Seagull hatchback. That would have been, sell at a price about $20,000 into the EU market. That could definitely, outcompete some of the current models that are popular in the EU markets. So I think this idea of, Chinese cars are flooding the EU markets is simply not true. And when you look at the car industries, as a matter of fact, there's a very substantial lack of evidence that the domestic industries, it suffer from any sort of material injury as a result of Chinese exports. In fact, a lot of the EU industry representatives, they voiced a concern regarding the investigation, and they citing the potential negative impacts on the supply chain, the innovations, and also market cooperation within the EU industry, within the EV industry. So I think the entire investigation is still unfolding, but it really, at this point, I think is really lacking substantive and also substantiated evidence to show this kind of countervailing duties are justified.
And yeah, so what do you think are the main factors contributing to China's rapid development in the EV industry and its competitiveness in the global market?
Right. So unlike what EU has claimed, it's all about the state subsidies. I think the two biggest reasons for China's EV success has to do, for one, the technological innovations. And I think in this field, there's so many entrepreneurs, so many professionals. They're rolling out new models. They're applying proprietary softwares, design of the cars, accelerating the battery charging capacities and increasing the battery charging state capacities, enhance safety and driving experiences of the drivers. All these innovations, I think, is the one of the biggest reasons for why this industry is so successful by the Chinese car makers. And the second reason, I think, has to do with the large scale of production, because that is very important to lower the cost of production. Once you build enough scale, that is able to drive down the costs. When you look at Tesla, for example, their Shanghai Tesla mega factory is twice the size of the production capacity than the one that they have in Texas or in Berlin. So I think those two measures, those two factors are very significant, are most important for China's EV success. And of course, behind us, I think these two factors are also due to important government strategic visions in supporting the industries in terms of supporting R&Ds, supporting some of the global engagements in getting, for example, important materials and so on and so forth. So the government does play a very important role, but that it's not a simple sort of subsidy story. And at the same time, I think it's also very important to understand the entrepreneurship that is very important, as well as the consumer preferences and the easy decision to adopt massively EVs. And so all of these constitute a very healthy ecosystem for China's EV developments.
And Baocheng, so are China's electric vehicles really posing a threat to the European auto industry, as the European Commission claimed?
Well, Not exactly, because as Yan mentioned, the China's export really constitutes a small portion to the entire auto industry, and also the fact that most of the actually of the cars exported, be it the e-vehicles or other conventional vehicles. Actually, it's more of the European investors who really have it made in China and build their competitive advantage as what they do at home, and then re-export from China to their home country. So the fact that they still enjoy the better utility and cost effectiveness is that because China, as Yan has mentioned, does really offer a number of the favorable conditions in terms of the scale, in terms of the government policy, in terms of the Chinese entrepreneurship, and also the very intensified competition even within the Chinese market. The 5 years ago, there were nearly 500 e-vehicle companies, and many of them really fall out because of the competition, and they cannot really join the race of technological advancement. So, these are really the issues that continue to support the Chinese ecosystem, which is really composed of both Chinese car makers and also foreign car makers within China. So and also the fact that Tesla is getting more successful both in quantity and also in the purchase preference within China shows that China is really doing the right thing. Now, technically, EU is really tracing back to 5 years of the subsidies that the Chinese e-vehicles have received. As a matter of fact, by the end of last year, China has won out the subsidies, but now they push the envelope and expand not only from the financial subsidies, but also in terms of differential treatments in different type of ownership, in different type of size and different locations, with some subtle support with regard to land concessions and other infrastructure support. Actually, many of those subsidies are really permissible within the WTO framework. And EU is now seem to trying to break the threshold of WTO and build a higher, the non-tariff barrier against the Chinese exports. So this trend is really showing, as the official from MOFCOM mentioned, a very strong sentiment of protectionism.
And so could the EU's investigation and the additional tariff inevitably harm the European consumers and their own interests? And on this tariff issue, why are different voices within the EU?
Right. So I definitely think that these countervailing duties will harm the consumer's interest because, as Professor Liu just mentioned, these kinds of protectionism measures are going to, add additional costs on the consumer side, because these tariffs eventually are going to be paid by mostly the consumers because the exporters will simply, impose a higher prices on their exports, because that need to factor into the tariff charges. And domestically, because the car industries are being protected, they're going to enjoy a higher freedom to set higher prices, right? If they're not going to have to lower their price to compete with the more effective, the more competitive cars from the exports, from the imports. So I think the consumers eventually will have to pay the price tag. Now, in terms of the industries themselves, I think they also see the potential damages, both their competitiveness, but also mostly from the global supply chain of the EVs. Because we know that China is having really a controlling, I think, position in many of these car parts when it comes to battery manufacture. China accounts for 80% of the global lithium-ion battery production. And China also occupies a very important node in terms of all these critical minerals, going from copper to lithium. So severing this kinds of trade links would mean disruption to the supply chain. And we will look at the industry themselves. When you look at, for example, Volkswagen and also the CEO of BMW, they all voiced significant sort of concerns over this move. They both claim that these kinds of countervailing duties are the wrong way to go. It's not suitable for strengthening the competitiveness of the automotive industry in the long term. And the Volkswagen simply said, we reject them. We reject these kinds of countervailing duties. And they also point out the timing of the EU's Commission's decision is detrimental, quote, to the current weak demand for BE vehicles in Germany and Europe, end of the quote. So in other words, these kinds of duties are not going to be helpful to strengthen the competitiveness of their own industries for the lack of competition from stronger player in this industry, but also from the disruption in the supply chain. And on the other hand, this higher price tag is going to dissuade consumers from adopting EVs. So I think this is really a lose-lose scenario for both the consumers and also for the industries themselves.
So,
well, I think now the harm are really multifold. One, of course, it directly add more burden on the consumer end, but more conceptually, it's really harming the total structure of the market economy because the countervailing duty is nothing more than really a new type of tariff, which means that the EU government is going to receive more of the income out of the increased tax, and then the consumers will pay the bill. The other is that the EU is really a big conglomerate composed of 27 members, and there are different preferences and different the landscape of using those e-vehicles. So therefore, they're going to create a more inequity within the entire EU structure, depending on different situation of individual countries. And then EU is proposing for green transformation, and now China's export does really come to the right age when Chinese people are really doing the hard work and also leave even some of the carbonization within China and export complete vehicles, which is e-driven. It's really come there to coordinate with the EU structure and dedication for green transformation, but now they reject it. That shows quite a level of hypocrisy in their policy proposals.
Well, we're speaking with Liu Baocheng, professor with the University of International Business and Economics, and also Yan Liang, professor of economics, Willamette University. And after a short break, Apple partners with OpenAI to roll out new artificial intelligence system. Stay with us. You're listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Apple announced its long-awaited generative AI initiative called Apple Intelligence at this year's annual developers conference. Apple says ChatGPT will be accessible on its devices later this year. Mark New has more.
With companies like OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft leading the charge in generative AI, Apple kicked off its Worldwide Developers Conference by introducing its own branding, Apple Intelligence.
We want to ensure that the outcome reflects the principles at the core of our products.
Apple says its personal assistant Siri is now able to retrieve and analyze the most relevant data on the screen that you're working on or within all your apps. It showed examples of Siri finding an email where a friend recommended books, and how when filling out a form that requires personal information, it can pull up a photo of your driver's license and enter the details for you, enabling its AI to better understand you. The company says that means greater security, since the AI features are mostly happening on your device as opposed to in the cloud. But if a request requires computational power off-device, Apple Intelligence claims it will only send the data that's relevant to your task to be processed on highly secure Apple Silicon servers.
You should not have to hand over all the details of your life to be warehoused and analyzed in someone's AI cloud. With Apple Intelligence, powerful intelligence goes hand in hand with powerful privacy.
And that includes partnering with generative AI leader OpenAI in a unique way. Siri can tap into ChatGPT, but ask your permission first to share your request with that chatbot.
If you want some advice on decorating, you can take a picture and ask, what kind of plants would go well on this deck? Siri confirms if it's okay to share your photo with ChatGPT and brings back relevant suggestions.
Apple also unveiled some new AI features that allows you to sift through and enhance your own content. For example, you can actually remove unwanted distractions in a photo and search for very specific photos and within video too. So as Apple seeks to harness the power of AI in personal ways, it also hopes consumers will be willing to shell out more to have that power in the palm of their hand.
That was Mark New reporting. So, Yan, first of all, could you tell us more about Apple's own artificial intelligence model, the Apple Intelligence? What can Apple users do with it?
Right. So the Apple Intelligence will enable transcriptions for phone calls. So any phone calls could be transcribed into words. And also it would help to perform certain functions such as AI photo retouching and also improvements in the natural conversation flow with Siri, which is a voice search and voice responding function. So all of these would be helpful to enhance the user experiences with the smartphones. And Apple Intelligence could also be used to summarize, for example, notifications and text messages, as well as articles, documents, and also open web pages. And so these would also be connected to the private cloud compute, which then will help to ensure data security. So Apple Intelligence remain a very attractive option for the future users of iPhones.
So, Baocheng, they did announce a partnership with OpenAI and ChatGPT to absorb the ChatGPT into the Apple products. Are you surprised that there was this partnership, or do you think there could be more potentially?
Well, I'm not surprised. I'm really delighted at the scenario there. Because for any type of information in the beginning, individuals are doing their own work and trying to jump the gun in the entire innovation race. And eventually, when they really wanted to form into new productive forces, they have to go for integration either on the capital end or on the alliance type of format. So now this integration is really going on, and that's going to be incubating a new way of lifestyle and also new way of entertainment and make it more user-friendly. So this is really a combination of different type of utilities together to support the users' work and life. Definitely, I'm going to see that there's going to be more wonders on the road, and which is going to be also very quickly delivered. So that's why we would say that this type of AI is going to bring revolutionary changes. If you're really able to narrow the divide of the digital gap, and you really are there to grab the chance to move forward with this type of new technological innovation. But those who really control information and still wanted to stay put and simply use the artificial intelligence as merely as a tool, and they're gonna lag further behind. And that also caused the a holistic approach in the institutional reform in many of those countries, from the educational system to the training of the workers, and also to the entire the manufacture operation, to the sales pitch, and after service, etc. So that really requires a whole lot of preparedness towards the further delivery of all the surprise and delights from the artificial intelligence. So Apple is there, of course, playing a leading role.
So, Yan, do you think Apple has any ambitions to dominate the generative AI space?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think the window is still wide open for Apple to be a dominant player, but definitely there will be an important player. As a matter of fact, I think Apple is relatively late in the game when it comes to incorporating AI. Microsoft, Google, and all these other companies have already done a better job and had a lead mover advantage. But I think for Apple, they do need to catch up. So this current Apple Intelligence, I think, is one of such strategies for Apple to keep up with the game of AI to be incorporated in its various products. So I think this is a welcome development on the part of Apple, but I don't think Apple at this point is able to play a lead role in terms of the AI development and application.
And yeah, what do you think do all these new leaps in AI mean for different industries?
Well, I think this will be productivity enhancing. As Professor Liu mentioned, I think the technology of AI is to really help to enhance the user experiences and also to have more productive applications of the various usages of your phone, of your computer, of your office suites systems, and so on and so forth. So this is mostly, I think, not only just for entertainment, but also when it comes to for work. You can see that these kinds of AI applications will help to enhance productivity. For example, this idea that AI is able to help to summarize all the text messages, articles that you would need to read or open the web pages. And all of these would help to reduce the time that you have to spend on processing this information because AI has done the job for you. So all of these would be very helpful for productivity.
While we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, and also Liu Baocheng, Professor with the University of International Business and Economics. And that's all the time we have for this edition of Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.